Most people think power belongs to politicians, billionaires, celebrities, people sitting at the top. But if you pay attention long enough, you realize something uncomfortable. Power exists in almost every human interaction. At work, in friendships, in relationships, in conversations, even silence can become a form of power. And that's what makes Robert Greene's Times, the 48 Laws of Power Times, so unsettling. Because the book doesn't describe the world the way people wish it worked. It describes the world the way it often actually works beneath the surface. Not morally, not emotionally, strategically, and once you start noticing these patterns, it becomes impossible to completely unsee them. The book is built around 48 laws gathered from centuries of political leaders, generals, kings, manipulators, artists, seducers, and survivors. Some laws feel intelligent, some feel dark, some feel disturbingly accurate, but almost all of them revolve around one idea. People are constantly responding to perception, not just reality. And the people who understand perception often control the room without appearing to. So instead of going through all 48 one by one like a textbook, let's understand the deeper psychology hiding underneath the entire book, because many of the laws are really different versions of the same truths. The first major lesson is this: never make people feel small. One of the most famous laws says, never outshine the master. At first, it sounds unfair. Why should competence be dangerous? But Green points out something deeply human. People don't just react to your ability, they react to how your ability makes them feel. You can be talented, intelligent, hardworking, and still create enemies simply by making insecure. People feel replaceable. A younger employee correcting the boss too aggressively, a friend constantly showing off success, someone who always needs to prove they are the smartest person in the room. Eventually, people stop admiring them. They start quietly waiting for them to fail. Powerful people throughout history understood something subtle. Ego management is survival. Sometimes protecting someone's pride gives you more influence than proving your superiority. And honestly, most people learn this too late, because intelligence alone rarely protects people socially. Social awareness does. Another huge theme in the book is control over appearance. Green repeatedly shows how powerful people master attention, not through constant noise, but through mystery. One law says always say less than necessary, because the more you talk, the more predictable you become. You probably met people who explain too much when nervous. They keep talking, trying to control how others perceive them, but strangely, it often creates the opposite effect. Meanwhile, the calm person who speaks carefully suddenly feels more confident, more important, sometimes even more intelligent. Not because they necessarily are, but because restraint creates psychological weight. Silence makes people project meaning. That's why mystery has always been powerful in politics, in leadership. Even in dating, humans naturally become curious about what they cannot fully read. And Green argues that visibility should be controlled carefully. Too much exposure weakens impact, which connects to another important law: protect your reputation at all costs, because reputation becomes social armor. Once people decide who you are, they stop evaluating every situation from scratch. They start filtering everything through the identity they've attached to you. That can either work for you or destroy you. A reliable person gets trusted faster. A dangerous person creates fear before speaking. A weak reputation invites attacks. And what's unsettling is how quickly public perception spreads. One mistake, one rumor, one moment of emotional weakness. Sometimes that becomes the permanent version of you in other people's minds. That's why Green constantly emphasizes emotional control. Never appear desperate. Never appear too emotional. Never reveal all your intentions. Because emotionally reactive people are easy to manipulate. The calmer person usually controls the interaction, and history proves this repeatedly. Many leaders didn't win because they were physically stronger. They won because they stayed psychologically composed while others became emotional. But this is where the book becomes controversial. Because some laws feel less like wisdom and more like manipulation. For example, use absence to increase respect and honor. In simple terms, people often value things more when access becomes limited, which sounds cold. But if you're honest, you've probably seen this happen constantly. The employee suddenly appreciated after leaving. The friend everyone ignored until they disappear. The person who becomes more attractive once they stop chasing attention. Humans adapt quickly to constant availability. Scarcity changes perception. Green doesn't necessarily say this is morally good, he says it's psychologically real. And that distinction matters throughout the entire book because the 48 Laws of Power is less of a moral guide and more of an observation of recurring human behavior. That's why some readers see it as dangerous and others see it as protection. Because once you recognize these patterns, you start noticing how often influence operates invisibly. Flattery, status games, selective honesty, attention control, strategic generosity, calculated confidence. A lot of human interaction isn't random. People are constantly reading social signals, trying to understand hierarchy, trying to avoid vulnerability, trying to gain leverage. And maybe the darkest realization in the book is this: many people hide their intentions behind appearances. Green constantly warns against blind trust. He explains how people throughout history survived by studying motives instead of words. Because words are cheap, intentions reveal themselves through patterns. Who benefits? Who disappears under pressure? Who changes when power enters the room? Who suddenly turns cold when they no longer need you? The book almost trains readers to become hyper-aware observers of human behavior. And honestly, that can either make someone wiser or more paranoid, depending on how they absorb it. But beneath all the strategy, one lesson appears again and again. Power often belongs to the people who understand human nature without becoming controlled by it. People who manage emotion, people who recognize ego, people who understand timing, people who know when to speak and when to disappear. Because timing itself is another major theme. Green repeatedly warns against forcing outcomes too early. Impatient people reveal desperation. Powerful people wait, observe, calculate. They understand that rushing creates mistakes. And this applies far beyond politics. You see it in business, negotiations, arguments, relationships. Sometimes the person who reacts first loses, not because they were wrong, but because emotion made them predictable. And maybe that's the biggest hidden lesson in the entire book. Power is deeply connected to self-control, not loud dominance, not aggression, not constant intimidation. Self-control, the ability to stay composed while others become impulsive, the ability to understand people without revealing everything about yourself, the ability to resist emotional traps. And ironically, many of the most powerful people don't look powerful at first. They simply understand people better than the people around them. Now, obviously, not every law should be followed blindly. Some laws can absolutely make someone manipulative, paranoid, or emotionally disconnected if taken too far. And even Green himself has said the book is meant partly as defense. Because understanding manipulation helps you recognize when it's being used against you. That may be the healthiest way to read it, not as a manual for becoming ruthless, but as awareness and understanding that human behavior is often more strategic, emotional, insecure, and perception driven than most people openly admit. And once you see that, you start navigating the world differently. You notice who needs validation, who hides insecurity behind confidence, who quietly controls conversations, who gains influence without demanding attention. you realize power is rarely just about force. Most of the time, it's psychological. And the people who understand psychology shape outcomes long before anyone notices what's happening. That's why the 48 laws of power continues to fascinate millions of people. Not because it teaches evil, but because it exposes uncomfortable truths about status, influence, ego, ambition, fear, and human nature itself. Truths people recognize instantly, even when they don't want to admit them out loud. And maybe that's what makes the book unforgettable. It doesn't tell you who humans should be, it forces you to look at who humans often are. Make sure to like the video and subscribe for new videos.